Okay, this is, okay, it is Wednesday, March the 6th. I'd like to start this Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for the City of Rollingwood. We'll start with roll call.
Michael Hall, present.
Tony Stein.
Jerry Fleming.
Dave Bench.
Lee Simmons, City Attorney.
Very good. And I'd like to welcome our new member, our new commissioner, Jerry Fleming, who has just joined us for the first time this evening. He has been sworn in, so he's an official guy, and welcome on board.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you all.
Welcome.
Very good. All right. Is anybody signed up for public comments?
We have a couple people on specific items on the agenda, but not for general public comments unless you guys wanted to do that also. No?
Okay, we're good. All right. Let's go through the consent agenda. We only have one thing on it. It is the draft from meeting minutes from last month's meeting. I trust everyone has had a chance to have a look at them. Do we have a motion on them?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes carry. Move on to regular agenda item number 4, discussion and possible action to elect the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission. We're gonna give it to Desiree here.
So according to Rollingwood's Code of Ordinances, each year, the Planning and Zoning Commission needs to elect a chair. It is in section 107, 461, and it must be by the majority vote of the commission. So anyone can make a motion to nominate, or you guys can discuss and then take a vote.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Dave Bench as chair.
I second the motion.
Okay. Jeannie is just, okay, very good.
I'm sorry.
Tony, would you repeat your motion?
I made a motion to nominate Dave Bench for chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
And I seconded.
Okay. We have a motion, second. Any discussion? Anybody else want to step in? All right. Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All opposed? Ayes carry. Thank you, folks.
Fearless leader.
Very much enjoying it. It's a good spot to be in. I recommend it to all retirees. So, let's see. Short-term rental. If we may, we have a friend of the commission here who is here to make a presentation on residential building. I promised that I would get her through this quickly, and so if everyone's okay, I'd like to move directly to item number 8, discussion and possible action regarding CRCRC residential building height measurement recommendations.
Alex Robinette, 2500 Hatley, and I am a member of the CRCRC. We've been at this for 11 months. I know that you all are updated on various things, and you're familiar with our process of having gone through and done a survey and analyzed the survey and in a lot of detail, including all of the comments, which were important because sometimes an answer didn't tell the whole story. Sometimes people got things backwards just based on what we were saying, and there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot to explain. So this is just going to focus on questions 1 through 4, and not even really question 1, because that was just kind of an intro question. But what we've done is taken the survey results, which you all have a copy of, and use that to help guide our recommendations. There were 274 respondents. On question 2, we asked, do you think Rollingwood should consider changes to its building codes? 64% said yes. 29% said no. However, of those, there were a number of ambiguous comments, and when you went through, I'm happy to share them with you if you want, because it may not be enough just to say they were ambiguous, but people would say, I don't know them well enough to have an opinion. I don't have enough understanding of our current codes to answer. We need more oversight and enforcement. My answer is maybe, not sure, not sure. That was kind of the gist of it. I think that there was a lot of comments about the fact that our codes might be fine, but they're not being well enforced, and that people are gaming the system. But the truth is, that's how our codes are written, and they're not gaming the system, they're not getting through Nikki, they are doing what is written. So, of the 175 people that answered yes to code changes, most people wanted to change how we measure height, which is also called the reference datum, was this piece that was set to help you determine where to measure your maximum height. And they also wanted building limits along the setback. They wanted to explore tenting. Those will come later. This seems like the most pressing piece. This is kind of building height and building measurement were the front runner. That's kind of what brought us here. Lots of people were talking about lowering building height. Got a lot of reaction to that. What the results told us should we change is, how do you feel about Rollingwood's maximum building height of 35 feet? 175 people, 63%, said it was about right. 25% said it was too high, 7% said it was too low, and 3% had no response. Of those that said it was about right, it's important to note what those comments actually said. A lot of them said something like this: it depends on where the 35-foot start and stop. Need clarity around this. Depends on how it is measured. The place of measurement is important. It really depends on whether it is measured from the ground or the finished floor. It should be from the ground. The foundation should be included in this unless the lot and highest backs onto a canyon where it wouldn't be overbearing. The problem is not the height per se, but the height from what grade. But does that include the foundation thickness? This very much depends on topography of the property and how the height is measured. It goes on like that. So, of the people that said it was about right, they had this qualification that 35 feet is about right. How we measure seems more important. So, that brings us to question 4. Should we look at alternate ways to measure building height, and if so, which options are preferred? 62% said yes, we should look at alternates. 32% said no, and again, ambiguous comments in that. I don't know if you want to hear those as well. A lot of them were about how we enforce the rules, and that builders are exploiting loopholes. Again, that's not been our understanding. That I think that they are following the rules. So, and of the options we gave them, one was to measure height from an average of the slope. The other one was to take an average of spots around the major corners of the building footprint. We're looking for the simplest solution, and most seem to like option 3, which was effectively taking a parallel plane of the site and mirroring it 35 feet up, and, well, not mirroring, but just moving it 35 feet up, and nothing can be above that. And I think that what we also went and looked at a bunch of other cities and what they did, and that's where all of these ideas came from. And most people seem to prefer this parallel plane idea, which also stipulates that. I don't have the wording for it on my pages here. But basically, the building cannot exceed 35 feet from the nearest adjacent grade, and the grade is measured, you have existing grade. If you decide to raise that grade, you still have to measure from the lowest point, which would be existing in that case, because you can't build up the foundation and then build 35 feet on top of that. Similarly, if you carve out, you have to take the measurement from that lower point, because you can't then say, I'm going to build 35 feet up here and then grab all that down below, because that's kind of what's been happening. 35 feet is a tall number. You can still build quite a lot of house in that size. It sort of requires people to follow the topography. You can step down and follow the grade. A lot of people have done that. A lot of people have built big houses using that just intuitively. And so that is our recommendation, that we keep the height at 35 feet. Part of this process is give and take, and we feel like making the fewest changes is preferred, where we're, trying to meet both sides of the argument as best we can, and then using this parallel plane as a measuring tool. I think that's
Thank
it.
you, Alex.
Do you have any questions?
I'm sure you folks have
Questions.
questions.
I was just curious, I hadn't noticed this before looking at it. So we had 62% say we should look at alternate ways, but then 55% then didn't respond to the question about
Which way?
which way. Just
And-
left it blank?
Correct. And my interpretation of that is that people don't understand it's complicated and they don't want to commit. But at the same time, if you go back, 62% said yes, we want you to do something. But when asked, well, what is it? I think that is what you're seeing, is that they didn't know, so they left it blank. But most of the remaining, most people chose option 3. It's 8%, 9%, and 27%.
Anecdotally, when we had gone around and delivered the door hangers, reminding folks that we have a survey coming up. In fact, it was, I think, going live that night. A lot of people who had answered the door whenever I had knocked asked the question specifically, is there an option there to ensure that it can't go over 35 feet in building height? Nobody asked if any other kind of question around building height. Only, is there an option, can I say that the way that we measure this can't exceed 35 feet? And I said, yeah, there is an option in there. You'll find it. So, I think,
Seems interesting to me that they wouldn't pick one of the 3. If you say, do you want to change? Yes, here's 3 options. Silence. It just seems weird. But anyway.
I got a question. On the topographical map, you're going to have a wide variety of elevations. So where does the 35 on the existing grade start at the very lowest part of your perimeter of your building, or is it an average or
It's
something,
if this is your building site,
right?
it's 35 feet up. The architect would take the line that represents
Okay,
the
on
grade.
on the lowest part,
Or the average, yeah.
let's say the rear line of your backyard varies.
'Cause it's
Yeah,
really
you
not
take
gonna be
an
like
average.
this, it's gonna be like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna
You,
weigh, so
you
which,
mirror
is it be, it's
all
the,
of that.
no, wait, is it
Oh.
the lowest part of your, you know, elevation on the site? If you have a dip, my yard's more like a question mark that's
Mhm.
laid on its side.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I got a flat and I got a hole. Is it 35 feet gonna be from the hole? Or,
You know, I think that depending on the size of the hole, if it's the size of a house hole, yes. I think if it's where a tree died or something, no. I think that you make an assumption about an average line. I mean, all of these things are assumptions, especially when they're drawn. You know, you're taking
does-
points and you're
Yeah, I know.
creating a line between them. So there's
Okay,
a certain
you
amount
got
of
a line and
inaccuracy,
you got-
but
You got the way, but you're taking the average.
yeah.
No,
Are you
it's
taking the
not an
lowest?
average. It is.
It's
if-
not the
if you
lowest
had-
point.
If you had
It's
a,
not the lowest
if
point.
you had a post that was 35 feet tall, you have a pole that's 35 feet, you can walk around the original grade, the native grade of the property, and you can put it there, and that is your maximum allowable height.
Well,
Maximum.
That,
Now, whenever, the way it sounds to me like you're asking, is, well, I got this and wavy and all that. Well, the maximum, you can always make something lower. We're talking about a maximum plane here,
well, yeah, but if you're in the lowest,
yeah.
you're, it may be 5 or 10 feet lower than some other parts, and that's, you've got a big, you're penalized.
No, so it's a moving point. And for instance, let's say there's a house on that hillside behind us. If I'm standing here and I look up, what I'm going to see from there to the top is going to be more than 35 feet. But that's not how I'm going to measure. I'm going to go around the perimeter and I'm going to find whatever the highest point is, whatever the nearest adjacent grade is, which is going to be somewhere up there by the parking lot and not here. So somebody may look at a house and go, well, that house is more than 35 feet. But if you look at it with respect to the grade that is against the house, that is closest to that point, that's where you measure. Does that make sense?
And isn't it also the building pad itself? I don't know the terminology, but so like for example, what you're saying, where you have a hole, you're not going to be building that in that hole, I presume. If it's like a drainage ditch, you're going to be building a little bit up higher, and at that point is when you're going to measure the 35 feet.
That's right.
It depends. Yeah, I mean, I don't know of any situations where there's a hole, but I understand that there's going to be things that we've missed that we haven't considered. But you can't build it up. You can build it up, but you still have to measure from basically the average contour line of that grade. So I've done this. I've taken a bunch of the plans for homes that are currently in construction or recently completed, and I've taken this line and I've taken a pole and I've run it up the grade against the house, and most people are just fine. Even houses that you look at and say are big are fine. Some of them are not.
Well,
But it's the line from, like if you have a pitch, you're going to measure that point at the closest grade
well,
to it. You're not going to measure it from here or here. You're going to measure straight down the nearest adjacent grade next to the house.
well, I think pitch roofs are probably gone away, and we're going to be on flat roofs now. So it's this, you got this at the top, and you got this down below.
But you cannot go above 35 feet.
I know, you're saying
Yeah.
you gotta go, your 35 is the lowest spot,
Yeah.
if you want a level.
Well, we don't want people to build a box like that.
Well, I'm-
We
I'm
want
just-
them
I'm
to.
just saying, you've got,
Yeah.
you've got sort of a two-dimension, plan for a three-dimension.
No, because you
situation.
would take the contour, you would look at it, not from one side, but from all sides.
Yeah,
But you'd
well-
still find the nearest adjacent. So you'd look at the high point of the house. That's all you're concerned about. And you'd figure out what is the nearest adjacent grade, which you can figure out in plan. Now, if it's a gable roof end to end, then you're gonna look at it from both sides. But if it's something in the middle that's like a tower, you would measure it from whatever in plan is closest. So,
But all the way across, or you're just taking one data point?
just one data point. You're also using that parallel plane that you've taken and copied on all
Right.
sides.
From both directions, from the front of the house or the back of the house?
Yeah, but
and
you
side of
might
the house?
look at it, like I said, you might look at it and go, well, there's over 35 feet of house when I look at it two-dimensionally from a certain view. But then when you look at it in plan or from the side, you see that that's actually stepped back. So it's not a 45-foot wall, which is something we're trying to get rid of because that's what we're getting. And all that house has to do is stop at 35 feet and step back. If they want to go higher, for instance, the house on, are we allowed to mention houses? Okay.
Oh,
There's a house that goes up to 45 feet in one plane, and you couldn't do that anymore.
Right,
You
you-
could go up 35 feet, but you could set it back, not very much distance, probably 8 or 10 feet, and still have your height because the grade is going up. Does that make sense?
well, I can just visualize a lot of different scenarios.
Yeah.
And it, if you have a undulating site, the low part, is that you're taking the existing spot and you're gonna have to, and you say that's it, that may end up being your building like first level spot. And you carve off, excavate around and go off, up from there.
Well, then I think maybe this is an opportunity to say something along the lines of creating an average between maybe a certain number of contours. Say that you take an average over
Yeah.
like 10 feet,
Yeah.
to account for something
I
like
think-
that.
I think average makes, in my mind, a little bit more sense when you have
Mhm.
such, change of slopes and elevations here. But
Well,
the
this-
concept of parallel, I like
Mhm.
and approve. I'm just trying to find, starting points.
Mhm.
And
Well-
the dilemma is you're going by the existing grade, which changes all over.
Well, and the
If-
problem with taking an average, sorry,
Yeah.
really quick, is that if you're going to take an average and you're going to get that middle point,
Right.
which means whatever's down low can go above 35 feet,
Right.
and that's what we don't want.
Well,
One.
yeah, and that's where I was thinking, you have that low plane, that
If you,
side, like north side, and you take the average of that side, or south side, or
Mhm.
wherever bottom part you're on, and just that one, side is down and moving around, and then you have, I say, your first floor of the elevation set there,
Mhm.
not, and then you excavate and can come back up. It's sort of a fine point if your rear property line dips down a little bit.
Mhm.
And
if you,
so I like the average when it's on a side.
I-
If you're following, then you,
let me just make one more point. Let me make just one more point, that if you we're starting with the native grade, so whenever the surveyors come in, and you're trying to get a building permit, surveyors come in and they survey the lot the way that it is. That's your native grade, right? Now, what we're saying, or what this is saying here, you take that native grade and you add 35 feet to it, and you just imagine a plane that is 35 feet of native grade. Whatever is built has to fit within those two, has to be sandwiched in there. That's it.
Do you have the graphic
But-
that
There's
Tony's
nothing
got?
to it.
yeah. but-
Right there?
And
That's it. You can't build beyond that top plane.
The graphics, yeah, I'm starting to struggle with the graphics two dimension from one side of the house. So obviously, if this were the slope, it could be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, picturing if this is your side view, and you know, this, and then this is the view from the front of the back. So you've got, you know, sloping to a corner effectively.
Yeah.
I guess you're saying there's a 3D
Yeah.
slope that parallels that through the whole thing,
Yeah,
is what you're saying.
that's right.
Yeah, I guess
And
I
all,
may-
Yeah.
I
and
don't
all
know
we're
how
talking
easy
about,
that is.
and this
to
is the
work with.
limit. It's not like you need to build your house this way. What it's saying is, this is the limit as to how high you can build. That's it. You can build anything lower than that, anything you want, but you're not allowed to pierce that top plane.
Well, I get the concept, I'm just trying to
Yeah, I'm trying to
grapple
picture how
with
you
the
design it.
information,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Oh, it's not hard.
And when you have, you know, a hole somewhere and then the bottom of the hole is your starting point.
I don't think the intent is to be an exact, you know, capturing every irregularity of the site. I think it is somewhat an average, which is, you know, how most things are drawn anyway. And so that's the intent.
If you could
I know,
capture.
I get the intent, but I like the details. We got, you know, at what, how many, what's our grid? 5 or 10 foot?
No, see, if you take the survey, just imagine that again.
Yeah.
The survey doesn't show a 6-inch hole. Whenever the surveyors come along, it doesn't say, you know, okay, well, right over here, there's a 2-foot hole that is 6 inches deep.
Well, it
Doesn't.
could be, tell them 1
And
foot
it- And on a 1-foot contour, it's not gonna show up.
well, it
He-
depends on where the, you know, the pole ends up.
No,
The guy
but
goes, you
I
know,
guess what I'm saying is that, you know, if you just follow the native survey.
Right. I
Maybe we
And
need to
go
see a
up-
topographic survey.
Your
and
native
try to
to-
be
yeah,
more-
Yeah.
yeah, don't worry about the holes in the ground.
Well, that's where the pole's going.
Well, okay, for instance, that rock ledge behind you.
I mean,
I think you wouldn't have to, and it drops down,
yeah.
and then there's this rock wall here. I would take an average line from the top of that stone ledge to the top of this dry stack rock wall. I wouldn't say that you had to fill in.
Well, this part, I'm not that concerned with. It's this part going that way where it's going like that, and you're trying to start somewhere with a patio. You know, imagine this patio, and you're saying we have to start at the lowest part of the patio rather than an average.
Yeah, it could have issues with, depending on how much the topography changes, like
Mhm.
over, because there's certainly lots at, like, at the street level,
So,
that's the
like-
highest, and then it goes this way or the other way, and so those, if you wanna build a pretty big house, and depending on what style, you may get penalized, because this is basically putting like a tent over it and saying you can't go higher in this part, so you'd have to like cut the roof line in a way maybe you wouldn't want, whereas if you do like a modern flat roof, then you'd have a lot more freedom.
Mhm.
So if you want something more traditional and you have a lot like that, you're gonna have more challenges, I think.
Mhm.
But if you go with something modern flat roof, I think you'd have a lot more.
And the whole point of this is that it is up to the designer to come up with a way of meeting the requirement.
Right.
We're establishing what the requirement is going to be. It's up to you to figure out how to fill that void between the two planes. You do what you want, but this is the rule. And that's right. And we never looked at it as a penalty, you know, as far as, you know, the way we looked at it is, well, the maximum height has always been 35 feet, but there have been ways to make it more than 35 feet. And that's what people were complaining about whenever they're talking about building height. People gaming the system because the way we measure it today, the way that it's written right now, is it takes advantage of slopes in ways that weren't really intended. And so by doing what we're doing here, we're taking away that 10-foot grace.
Well, I no qualms with that. I'm just, if I can borrow your little picture there. Notice that this thing starts at the bottom here.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm saying that bottom goes up and down, and you're saying you gotta be at the lowest part.
I think that,
And this
Thank
is
you.
this is where,
Thanks.
you know, my mind is stuck trying to, you know, find out where you start down here with an undulating grade and not confine it to just the.
you
the
start
level.
where you want to put the building.
Oh,
but
or-
I
or
also
another
think that-
question- Or another way is, you're, to get around that, if you want to be under 35 feet, you build up the base down there, you know, and if you got a couple foot hole, you put your base there and you have to be, you know, no higher than 32,
Okay.
okay? And hopefully your holes aren't,
But that's okay.
I
You
think
can do
that we need
Yeah,
to,
you're all right.
I think that we could say something along the lines of more of an average grade and not a
I-
literal
Well,
mapping.
isn't that, that's
to-
really
to
what a
an
contour
extent.
is.
Yeah,
A contour is a
it
grade.
is already, yeah.
But
So,
I know, we're getting into the weeds.
I think
very
it might be
much.
helpful
Very
to
much.
have a topographic survey to kind of try to visualize something maybe more in 3D than just a diagram. I don't know.
I have a
Yeah.
question. It is a bit confusing.
mhm.
And so I'm sure a builder or an architect would even find it a little bit confusing to try to decipher the rule. And you said that you guys looked at other cities. How were their ordinances written so that it, because I mean, I think it's a little confusing, but I'm just curious as to what other cities have done to simplify it.
What cities use this
There
particular
is
method?
text in this recommendation. And,
Yeah, I don't know that I got it in there. I mean, I have it here.
You've got the recommended option 3, the maximum allowable height shall be measured as a vertical distance from this existing grade.
Is that it? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's in here.
Okay. Well, this came from other cities. And there are quite a lot of cities that have used this. I mean, do I need to read this or do you all have it?
For the record, you can put it on there so that anybody who is following along.
Okay,
can
it
read
says, "The maximum allowable height shall be measured as the vertical distance from the existing grade of the site to an imaginary plane located at the allowed height above and parallel to the grade. Height measurements shall be based on existing topography of the site before grading for proposed on-site improvements or finished grade, whichever is lower. There shall be no point of any building or structure that exceeds the prescribed height above the existing or finished grade, whichever." This starts to get into sort of,
Yeah,
Um,
it said finished grade.
it
You-
did, but
right.
it also said existing grade, whichever was lower,
Well,
so.
well, the ordinance is simple when you say 35 feet max and forget about the holes. And maybe that's.
But you need to know how, yeah, to measure it. I mean,
Yeah, and
you-
just know
how
that
do you-
some parts, when you start out, have to be, if you're in the hole, lower than 35 feet, and you just go with it. And you're gonna be cutting into probably some slopes.
mhm.
Uh,
That's the other thing. If you have kind of a basement or partial basement, you know, that's bonus. It's not counted because it's concealed by the grade. So you could actually effectively have more house. It's just whatever is above grade is 35 feet.
But this, so finished grade, so like this one, you're measuring from the flat finished grade because it's lower, right?
Well, yeah, but you're under it. Well, yeah, you're right. That should be, that finished grade should have been moved up there. You're right. But it is below.
Well, I guess, yeah, my question is
It's
if,
a little shorter than 35 feet.
Yeah.
At the interior.
Mm-hmm.
so your limitation, if you have slope, is just what's showing can't be more than 35 feet?
Correct.
So I'm picturing again, slope, we'll call it back and
Mm-hmm.
to one side. So if you're creating a semi basement,
Mm-hmm.
you'd have one side the grade would be higher because it's sloping away. So you'd be max at 35 feet, and then the part that has the grade would be something less than 35 feet showing.
Well, I
If you've got
suppose
kind of a
so.
three-
Yeah, if you're showing one, if the basement and the other face is open, it has to be at 35 feet. Yeah. But by our estimation, 35 feet is still really high. You know, we were leaving that there, even though there was a lot of recommendations that we lower it or do something about measuring how we do it. So that was our interpretation.
Well, you mentioned if you're on a grade such that you could have an open basement, and that's exactly the house I grew up in on Timberline. And so from the street, it's a 2-story house,
Right.
but from the rear, it's 3 stories.
Yeah.
Because it had an open basement. So, so with that example, are you measuring from the basement foundation to 35, or are you? Where are you measuring?
You know, in that case, you're measuring from if the basement is exposed and visible
On
it's
the
a
back side,
walkout.
but not on the front.
Yeah, I mean that is a question that we've talked about. If it doesn't impact people, like that's really the driving factor, then is it okay? If you know, it's not, if you're not in a situation where you're really looming over the neighbor behind you by creating
Right.
and maybe there's a limitation that says, okay, if, you know, the reason we didn't do this is because you wind up in a situation with a house that has a partial basement garage facing the street that goes up to 45 feet. If it's not facing the street, maybe we make an exception. I don't know.
No, I think that, you know, in all cases, I think we're always starting with the existing grade. And if you undercut the existing grade, it's still the existing grade measurement that rules what happens. So yeah, it's possible that you're gonna find for a walkout basement that you're gonna exceed 35 feet.
On the back.
I think in Jeannie's
backside,
example,
but-
you would have to, let's just say you're building the front,
But-
instead of 2 stories, you're building the front to 35 feet.
But
And the
suffice it.
back's much lower, you would have to have, the roof would
Yeah.
have to step down so that that's
Yeah.
35 feet in the
Okay.
back.
Ideally.
also, right?
But you know, what we're talking about right now, because we believe that this was the most urgent set of things that needed to be worked, is we're talking about what the maximum height is allowed to be and the way that it gets measured. Now, we have other tools in the works that are not ready for discussion yet, but they probably will be in either the
Close.
next P and Z meeting or the one after that, that will not permit 35 feet straight out of your door. You know, you'll find that you just can't do it. You won't be
Yeah.
allowed
On the setback.
on the setback.
So we're talking about one issue now. I have a question. Part of the origination of the CRCRC was, you know, we talked about, there were a number of times we had setback, we had height, where we had these individual discussions at different meetings. And part of what we said was, you know, doing this piecemeal, we're going to wind up with Frankenstein code. Why don't we use a blueprint that we used on the commercial, where we said, let's deal with it all together in a it's called the comprehensive code, and come back and review all of it together. I guess my question would be, if we have other things that are impacting height, specifically tinting, why would we talk about these separately and not all together? I guess that's my question.
Well, because we have, I guess, about 20 items that need to be covered. And, you know, we have our meetings that, just like this, they find themselves spending most of their time on a single item. We're under a bit of pressure to get something out the door.
Pressure from
I get a lot of phone calls about people asking why we don't have anything out yet, or when are we going to get something out?
From citizens, you're talking about?
From government as well. So originally, I had expected to do this in a piecemeal fashion. And then I got some counseling that said to do what you did. Create a comprehensive package that gets presented all at the same time. Then I started getting more calls from people that said, don't do that. Get the most important things out first. And here we are. Most important things out first. Okay, so,
More important to whom?
well, I guess what the perception is that right now, let me back up a little bit. I think about a year ago, there was a perception that because of COVID and because of rising interest rates and so on, that there was going to be a slowdown in building and that we might have certain additional time to work through some of these problems, okay? If we're going to make changes, well, we may have a little bit of time to do that. But it turns out that's not the case at all. That the building boom never really did slow down, or if it did, not appreciably. And so citizens and government are concerned that, well, wait a minute, if we're going to do this thing, we better get it done. There are certain constraints that we're looking to have put on our housing, on the building code. And either we do it, CRC, or CRC says, don't do it. But either way, give us something to chew on. Give us something. Let us take the survey, hear what the citizens have to say, and act on them as quickly as we can, which is exactly what we're doing.
I agree. I think you've done incredible. I guess my concern would be if we start making some of the changes in isolation that are directly tied. It's concerning when you say, let's tackle the height, and then, but we also have these other things that are going to impact the height at certain parts
Yeah.
that are going to come later. I don't know. My view was a large reason we had the CRC is exactly so we didn't have that happening.
Well, we almost brought that tonight, but I don't think it's ready. I got in the way of it, frankly.
It's ready for the next P and Z meeting.
It'll be ready. It'll be ready next time.
I mean,
Now, here's where we are, folks.
and that's the thing is we have been
Yeah,
talking
it's a
about
monumental.
all
Yeah.
of these
yeah,
things.
it is monumental.
And to us, I think that building height, that's just something that you have to establish. And all of these other things will have some effect, but not like, it's not going to change this. Like, you have to have a building height and you have to have a way of measuring it. And the other tools will impact maybe what's happening along the sides, but it's not going to change the overall height, which seems to be the biggest issue with most people. And fixing it seems to be the biggest priority. It's the front runner, you
Now,
know.
What Alex is here for this evening is to make this presentation. That if it gets approved, if you are on board with what's being presented here, a motion can be made to take this and it will go to City Council. And the same presentation will happen with City Council. And then they'll make a decision whether or not they want to support it. Now, if you don't think that we're ready to go to City Council with this, we can hold back. If you really think that you want to have all components that have anything to do with building height all considered at the same time, we can hold off. We don't have to make a motion tonight.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
because the CRCRC still hasn't agreed on its own recommendation, we can't. The Planning and Zoning Commission it's not permissible to make a motion on a recommendation tonight until the committee actually arrives at an agreeable solution and makes its recommendation.
But these things have been arrived at. The building height and the means for measurement have been.
There's not been a motion on that at the CRCRC page.
Okay, I thought we had discussed it, that what we had done was, we did not take a formal motion of those things, but we did have a full agreement. And you can, and that's on
asked at the
video.
last meeting, yeah.
We did for the driveway ordinance. For this, there was a long discussion
At the end of the,
made
yeah.
and all voted on it.
Okay, my understand, okay.
Well, at the last meeting, just before we adjourned, I asked, can we bring this forward and talk to you about it? And you said we could, and we still hadn't adjourned
Define, can we bring it forward?
to P and Z, to bring building height, because we said we were ready. Can we go ahead?
You have to have these recommendations like you have written
Okay.
here, and read that recommendation as a motion and vote on it at CRCRC, and then it can come.
Okay.
I'm sorry if I was unclear.
Okay.
Now, yeah, I thought we had worked through this. I'm a little surprised that we, 20 minutes ago, said that a motion could come out of this group on these things and go to city council. But it couldn't go to city council unless a motion from P and Z. And I was specific. I said, are you saying that the CRC had, no, we've already talked about the CRC not having a motion on it. If this group makes a motion to carry these forward, it can go.
That, well, I believe that discussion we were having was on the driveway ordinance. I apologize if that was in regard to this.
I see it as everything that we're talking about here.
When we had this discussion on the phone with our city administrator last week about whether this could be put on here for action or not.
And I think that the city administrator said, yeah, yes, we could do that. We could do it.
You asked for action, so we put it on for
Okay.
action. So
All right.
then if it's a legal question, we have to consult with the attorney.
All right. Okay,
So there's some confusion.
okay.
Well, that aside, other question too, when we change code, usually we have proposed code, new code, old code language, new code
No,
language.
we're not, this is a little, no, we're not talking, what we're doing is making, our role as a CRCRC is to make recommendations for code changes, not to make code changes.
No, but usually when we on planning and zoning have voted on code changes, we've had, here's the current code, here's the proposed code.
You will get that chance the second time around, just like we're going to be seeing with the commercial code.
Once city council has a
Presentation.
chance to hear the recommendations, if
Yeah.
I may, then they will decide how they want the code to be written and go through the ordinance process.
Yeah, we're
And
not,
that's when you'll have public hearings with P and Z.
And when they decide that, then they send it back to P and Z to look at the code?
Once they've chosen which recommendations they approve, then those will go back to have code be
Yeah.
written and at the
Yeah.
P and Z level, and with a public hearing, once the code is written, if I understand this correctly. And then you guys would, make a motion to approve the ordinance as it's written, and then that would go to city council, and they would have to approve it as well for it to become an ordinance.
So whether we can or can't do anything because of what did or didn't happen at CRCRC, what we would have been, if somebody made a motion, it would have been conceptually send this to city council, not propose code, send this to city council. So you say conceptually,
that's effectively, yeah, it's conceptually.
You're
It's
like
a
making.
set of it's a recommendation.
Yes.
This is what we're doing. We have recommendations, not code, just recommendations. We recommend the code be changed to include these kinds of things, but we don't have the wording for it. We're not experts.
we have often on things we
But
very often have.
If you'll
specific
think
language.
back to whenever the comprehensive plan was presented to us, and that was over a year ago, what we had was a document that was walked through for us that said this recommendation, this recommendation, this recommendation. And we, P and Z, agreed that yes, those recommendations are good, or we had the opportunity at that time to make one last tweak to it. We see what it says, almost there, why don't we change the wording or make it this instead of that? And we had some last input on that. Now that work has continued to go on, and now it has been, or is starting to be codified, and will soon be presented with the results of that code. And from that point, then we make a decision as to whether or not we're approving the code change or not approving the code change.
Or proposing changes to the code change.
I guess we
Yeah.
could, yeah. We'll have opportunity for that. So
Yeah, I'm
this
just
is
trying to
this is the
understand
first.
big picture.
So this is the first step in getting it codified. It's the first step that we all agree that this is the way we want to do it. The code comes later. We're gonna try to make that go quickly. I don't know whether we can, but we're gonna try.
So can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
My suggestion would be, if you're not sure, to send this back to the CRCRC for some more discussion, to come up with a very specific recommendation to come to you, and then you guys can evaluate that recommendation as to whether you would like to send that to city council. Or if you're good with what she has written here, you guys can recommend that to city council, but for these particular building height ones, we do not have a recorded motion from CRCRC that there was agreement on this. There was a long discussion, but we do not have that. So this is like the first process. We're working out the process as we go as well.
Given the conversation we had here, it may be extremely helpful to have like a couple more examples, like with lots having some features with topography, maybe moving not just one direction, but like forward and back and to the side or something, so that people can understand, you know, what that means exactly. And there's two ways, like a lot can slope, you know, it can slope up or it can slope down generally, right? And so those will look, and could be very steep. So
I know sometimes we don't want to pick on specific lots, but I'll say I have a active building permit on a very sloped lot right now that I'm not sure I'm going to build or not, and you're welcome to go pull that, you know, topographic survey and the plans, and we could run through that. I would have no issue with that.
I think you've shared it with us. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I
it's-
thought mine has that basement concept.
It easily
partially-
passes all of this.
Yeah, I think it
Yours
did,
does,
which-
Yeah.
Well, the-
Ironic, we didn't talk about height and designing it. We talked about what we wanted.
Well,
Unfortunately, developers don't do it that way.
I'm sorry. The house that I grew up in on Timberline at 4906, it was just a simple rectangle. So, I mean, it was 2 stories from the front and 3 stories from the back. But there was no walkout. There was no progression. It was a simple rectangle. So it is, you know, it is kind of interesting. How do you measure something like that? Because it had no stepping.
Is it still like that, or is it?
It burned down.
Oh, okay.
But the replacement that's there, I think, was on the same blueprint, I mean, the same footprint. And, yeah, I think it still has it has to have a walkout basement because the grade is such that, but it's 4906 Timberline.
Okay.
So the back of it's from, it's not Grove Court, but on the other side of Grove Court, off Edge Grove.
One question about this too. It seems like the way with the measuring from the lower of existing grade or finished grade, and I think you alluded to this earlier, it seems like part of it is more solving for how much you see in a plane versus necessarily how tall or imposing it is to the neighbor. Was that a discussion? Because I guess you could say, well, why can't I dig in? You know, fine, I can't go high. Can I dig in? But you're saying even if you dig in and the height of the house does not change, you did by digging in, you could make the perception of the height of the house change. You could have the, you know, on this, you could have the exact same thing, but dig even further down, and then that back wall is more than 35 feet. Well, it's not going to be any more imposing because it's the same exact structure. It's just going to be viewable lower.
Right.
So was that more of a discussion than the height, or just a
Well,
balancing?
ideally in that situation, they still could step back where that basement plane is, and so that the 35 feet was still met, you know, from whatever the nearest grade was. So.
But it sounds like there's a heavy emphasis on managing what's visible.
Yes.
Regardless.
Yes. I think that what happened with the basement discussion was it got too complicated, and we were trying to find a cleaner solution that worked in all cases. You know, but if we need to re-examine that, we can. So.
I don't think our recommendation is going to change. what we might do is, and I think that Mike's comment is good, is that we might provide more examples as to how it would work in real life, okay? And, you know, and get you a little more comfortable with it. What we're doing here, I think what we're recommending is not really alien in nature, and it is really broadly used across the industry, and a lot of topographies that are similar to Rolling Woods. And it's working there, and we think it can work here. So, but we can bring more information to it, but I don't think the recommendation's gonna change. We'll just have to support it a little bit better.
Okay.
We have talked about this a lot. I can tell.
I can only imagine.
A lot.
So
And
35 feet is.
the 35 feet's good. Yeah, we're good there, you know, but, yeah, but exactly how you get to it, you know, it's a geographic, or, geographic kind of.
I think it's hard too, thinking about
Geometric.
other changes I might have. I actually was a proponent of lowering it to 30 feet.
Yeah.
But I was in the
Yeah.
distinct minority.
Yeah,
But part of the reason I had that view was some of the houses that are the most imposing, I guess, to me, are actually the ones on flat lots, where they're built to the
Right.
setback and it goes straight up 35 feet. Some of the ones that are 45 feet or 40 or whatever the number is on a sloped lot,
mhm.
I don't find as true. I hate the foundation, which y'all have talked about, the exposed foundation, but
It really comes down to, you've got a number
But
of
maybe
houses
you're
that are
saying
like
that some of
this,
the-
you know, that this is 35 feet here, and they build straight across, okay? And so what they end up with is 45 feet over on this side. And what we're saying is, you're not gonna be allowed to do that. You can do this.
They're
That's
also
it.
doing it on, they're taking a sloped lot
Yeah,
and flattening it
yeah.
and using the rule to get to 45 feet on what is now a flat lot, because they carved it
I
out.
feel like that we keep going around and around on that. I know we've talked about that in the past, where they said no, it currently is at existing grade, and they can't change the grade and then start measuring.
That's right.
We've talked about that
Yeah,
before.
that's right.
So they can't come in and do what you're saying. Has always been my understanding.
Well, they can now.
My understanding is they couldn't.
Well,
You know, we've talked-
That's how most people would understand it,
Yeah.
but it's still possible the way it's written
Yeah.
to do just that. I think it's right. You're
I thought our current
Right
code
next
said
to it.
existing grade.
There's actually, I'm afraid I don't have the code in front of me, but, you know, it talks about, you know, measuring from this thing or this one, whichever gives you the greatest amount of distance.
But it's still, that's two different points,
Yeah.
but it's supposed to be an existing grade.
Yeah, it is supposed to, I think that's right.
And I remember we had this conversation before.
Yeah,
Can you monkey with the existing grade to create more? And the consistent answer has been no.
no,
From
but
staff.
that doesn't stop people from doing it. I mean,
How do
there
they do
was-
it?
Yeah.
I mean, you
They
can't change the
pile
existing
it up.
grade.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know.
I wish I knew.
That one's always been a point of contention. I get
Right.
different answers from different people.
But I think, what we need.
Because you even opened the meeting saying we're not having people massage, whatever, you know, we're
Right.
not having that. They're abiding by the code. Currently, it's just that the code is flawed. The code says existing grade.
true. Okay, but there was a case of somebody piling up some dirt to get a higher difference.
Before they measured existing grade?
I believe so. But this
That
is
still could be
second,
done right
third
now,
hand.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, with this
Yeah.
new one, you can do
Well, yeah.
that. I mean, that's kind of criminal.
If,
Well, but
Well,
that's
yeah,
why, yeah, but what they were looking at in our current code is all you had to find was 2 points. And so now, you know, and you could pile up and get the highest point. Now we're talking about looking at a much broader area. We're taking more of the site into context to create this plane. And so what happened with our current code is You can pick a point and you can add, now I've already forgotten which was the high or the low point, but you can add 10 feet. But even if you don't meet that criteria, you can still add 9.9 feet. Anything that you want in the foundation is not counted. So you
Well, I
end
remember
up
asking
with,
that at past meetings too, is the foundation counted? And point blank, everyone said yes. The foundation is counted in the 35 feet, or the 45 feet as the case may be.
well, they count it
They're not,
in the,
they're not able to go 45 feet from an elevated foundation
no.
currently.
No, the maximum is 45 feet. So they do count the foundation in that scenario. But to set the reference datum, you can have, you're not measuring that
You have
for
to
the
measure 2
35
points within the
feet.
setback,
Yeah,
or within the buildable area
yeah,
of existing grade.
Right.
And so the only way somebody can monkey with that is
Okay.
tear down a house, change the grade, then do their existing.
and when we had the 5-foot radius, that really opened up the opportunity to capture even more grade to get a higher point. Just,
Yeah, but I don't think, well, I
So
don't know
we
that
got
meant they were building it up,
that.
but anyway.
I think that what we're going to need to do is to come back and maybe start with a short discussion of exactly what today's ordinance is and what it does. And then show some example, well, we can talk about this same change that we're recommending here. And then provide some additional examples so that we can see, you know, how it plays out in real life. And the bottom line is this, folks. If P and Z isn't comfortable with what we're presenting, it's not gonna be comfortable to city council either. And so you guys are kind of the testing ground here, you know, on all this. And if you can't pass it for us tonight, and I'm being told that we're not allowed to even get it passed tonight, well, we're gonna have to come back and do something again anyway. It doesn't really matter so much. We're not gonna get there. So, let us go back to the drawing board and come up with a little more, maybe a better story. But I'm gonna tell you, I don't believe that we're gonna be changing the recommendation. The recommendation is what it is. We just need to do a better sales job.
I don't know that I necessarily have any, I mean, I don't have any specific problems with it. I think it's, yeah, an understanding
Well,
issue.
well, like I
But
said,
I- but I do think
we're not
I-
gonna get it passed tonight anyway, so we're gonna have
Yeah,
to come
I'm
back.
surprised. I thought I thought the whole point of the CRCRC was to look at everything collectively because everything is impacted. So that kind of taking pieces of it at a time wasn't my understanding of how it was gonna work.
which makes sense, but to Dave's point, I mean, we'd have to set up tents because we'd have to go through all of these things all at once, and it's going to take a long time because they're each
No.
require a lot of nuance and understanding. And so I don't know how we're going to feed all of it to you at once. I mean, maybe we could give it to you.
Yeah, it would probably we'd have to get away for a weekend
Yeah.
to go through and actually take you through all the work that's going on in CRC.
But I think
in order to be able to present it all at one time.
We could at least put a document together potentially that gives it to you all to study
Yeah.
and think about so that maybe we could
Yeah.
expedite,
But-
but
At least you have in front of you what, you know, where we're headed with it. And you've got a month to think about it, you know, and you've got a month to think about new questions if you have them. And for that matter, you know, you can even send me a note if you think that there's something wrong with it that needs to be fixed. But I think, like I say, this is our first one out the door. We're trying to progress it. It doesn't look like it can progress tonight. But this has been, this has been instructive from the perspective as, you know, how we're presenting things and what it is maybe we need to do in order to make you comfortable with whatever it is to take it forward. Is that fair? So I guess what I'm saying is if someone wants to make a motion to table this whole thing, that'd be great. We can do that, can't we?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, I move to table it until we have a little bit more context for the specific discussion.
I'll second that.
Okay. We got a motion and a second. Any more discussion on it? All right, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you for your
Thank
time
you.
and
Thank you,
feedback.
Alex.
Yeah.
That was
Thanks for
very
all the
good.
work on it.
That was very good.
Unbelievable.
All right, we're gonna get there. All right, moving back to item number 5, discussion regarding rental of residential amenities. And I think that was to be presented by a member of staff.
Hi, so at the last city council meeting, there was a discussion regarding the rental of residential amenities. And if I can give a quick summary kind of the discussion, there are currently companies renting amenities on a short-term basis, similar to like how homes are rented on Airbnb or VRBO. So for example, someone could rent a swimming pool or something like that for the evening or for 2 days or something. Staff at this time has not received any complaints regarding the rental of residential amenities in the city of Rollingwood. However, per a council member, there is at least one pool in the city being rented on Swimply, which is a platform for renting pools. The Rollingwood ordinance currently does not allow short-term rental of homes. At the last council meeting, City Council considered a draft ordinance prohibiting short-term rental of residential amenities after requests from community members. If you saw in the agenda packet, there was a draft ordinance, and that's what City Council was looking at. For an example would be like renting out a pool or a backyard kitchen on a short-term basis, something of that sort. During the discussion, a council member questioned why this should be limited to just short-term rentals. And per the city attorney at that meeting, commercial uses are already prohibited in the residential zone. But there are questions about when a use becomes commercial. So council had some questions like, where's the distinction between commercial and non-commercial use in the residential zone? And is this short-term rental or just rental of amenities an issue that even needs to be addressed? And so council's direction specifically was that they would like planning and zoning to look at the issue of rental of residential amenities. And discussion that's had on this topic will be taken back to city council for them to consider. And our council liaison is here if you have any more questions about what council wanted in this. So that is
Thank you, Desiree.
the basic summary.
Thank
I have
you.
one question. I guess it could apply to short-term rental or this pool on whatever that website is. If or just right now, we already have no short-term rentals. Does that allow us to force someone to pull, if somebody puts their house on Airbnb, does that allow us to force them to pull that down, or do you have to catch them in the act of renting it in order for that to be a violation? I mean, I guess my question would be if we, you can't rent your amenities and somebody leaves their Swimply up and keeps renting it and nobody ever complains. I mean, can we shut them down where they can't even advertise it?
I think that's an enforcement question, and we don't have our code enforcement officer here right now, so I'm not sure exactly the details of that. Chief, did you want to speak to that?
Right, so we would interpret it as that advertising it is really not in violation if the act of actual renting it hasn't taken place.
It's probably a challenging thing to enforce anyway.
So that's, unless legal tells us otherwise, but it's one thing to advertise, it's another thing if you actually have legal documentation or there's been an exchange for rental.
I could look into that question and clarify for that. I don't have that right off the top of my head.
Right.
Certainly happy to look into it.
So with us, it's always been that it's actually had to be in the process of occurring.
That's what I figured was probably the answer, but. So I guess we could change this, and it doesn't absolutely mean it's going to shut it down, but.
Yeah,
somebody
this
could-
item refers specifically to the renting of residential amenities.
Right.
So only, the backyard kitchen, the pool, the yard, other things you can think of, maybe playground equipment on it, for a short term.
Well, as I read the ordinance, I thought it was pretty clear. So, I have no objections to it.
I don't either.
Very good. So, I think that city council is wanting from us a motion to approve this or not, so it can be set up there. There was a lot of discussion at the last city council meeting about this, and I think what they really wanted was to hear some more voices on it, not just relegated to themselves. So here we are with it, and if we're good to go with it, then we could take a motion to move it up.
So specifically, I think the question from council was, are you talking about short-term rentals of residential amenities or rentals of residential amenities at all? So like, that's the distinction, one of the distinctions they would like you, and then whether or not this even is an issue that needs to be addressed within the city of Rollingwood. Those were the two things that I got from that discussion.
So my 1-year lease of my grill in the backyard is gonna have to be torn up.
It is amazing what people will do to make money.
Keep me honest here, is what I Brooke Brown, am the council liaison for planning and zoning from the council. And the question here was both, we wanted P&Z to post this and get comment on it so that to see if this is an issue that people want the council to address. I think there is a strong sentiment within the community against short-term rentals of properties. The problem we had was, if you look at lines 30 to 32 of the current ordinance, it prevents the short-term rental of a residential structure. So it's less than clear of whether or not rental of an outdoor patio, a swimming pool, something outside the structure would be covered. So that's the reason for having to do a code amendment. If planning and zoning is, this was actually brought to council's attention by a member of the community. So it came from a member of the community, and we have posted it for discussion. It's now been posted at P&Z for discussion. I think the next step would be to require a public hearing on it because it is a zoning change. Is that right?
The ordinance is not.
I need council to address that, our city attorney to address whether or not this amendment to the Code of Ordinances would have to be noticed in a public hearing for adoption. It is in the zoning code.
I believe a public hearing would be necessary in this case.
Yeah. So I think the next step would be to have planning and zoning request that this be placed on an agenda for a public hearing.
The ordinance is not for consideration at this meeting. This was a discussion item. This was put in as an example for discussion purposes only. This ordinance specifically is not being considered by planning and zoning right now, but it's for you to look at. If you'd like it to get to that step, then I think the next step would be to request the public
So
hearing.
it's basically, do we
That's what
as a
I'm
body,
saying. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
do we as a body object to city council going down this path is kind of the question.
No, it's that planning and, this has to be, under state law, planning and zoning has to review and recommend for approval at a public hearing.
Right.
So if you're in favor of this, then the next step would be to request that the ordinance be placed on a public hearing agenda, which is different from tonight's meeting. There's a different notice procedure for that.
Right, so today we're just saying, yes, conceptually this is a good idea, or no, we don't think that's a good idea.
I would
That's
say
all right.
you're taking, I think what the council would like to hear is whether or not you want to hold, place an ordinance that would prohibit short-term rentals for consideration at a public hearing to be held at P&Z.
Yep.
That would be the next step.
This is, yeah. So, given what Councilperson Brooke Brown had just told us, are we willing to do that? That's really the question, and if we are, then someone make a motion and we'll knock it out.
So the motion would be that we propose that this ordinance revision be posted through a public hearing
No,
at a P and Z meeting in the future.
Commissioner,
I
if I'm
don't think that's quite it.
Since this is a discussion item tonight, what we
Oh.
can do is add it to the next agenda as a public hearing, at
So we
which
just
time you
ask for
can,
Well, that's what I was trying to say.
that's right.
So we just informally ask, we think we should
That's
have a
exactly
public
right.
hearing to
That's-
you could just direct-
discuss
That's what-
making a change like this.
Just direct staff
That's
to add
exactly
it to the
it,
next
yeah.
P and
Let's
Z
do it.
agenda.
So, do you want to revise your
We,
motion?
no, he's
Yes,
saying we don't
as
need a,
stated.
we don't need a motion because
We don't need a
we
motion?
can't take action on this, it's a discussion.
I thought we were taking
No,
making a
because-
motion as to have a public hearing.
We're making a suggestion, we just asked for it.
I gotta
Ask
tell
and you
you,
shall receive.
I need a,
Oh, all right, so now I understand.
I need a go-by on some of these things because I don't, you know, it seems like the rules are malleable. Anyway, all right, so then we have just done that?
We have asked for a public hearing.
Did we
I
take a
think we
vote?
have just asked for a public hearing?
Just-
Do we have that right? I want to make
Do it,
sure,
can-
honestly, I want to make sure that whatever it is we're doing here is what's being asked for. Did we do what was being asked for?
Are you directing staff to place this on a future agenda?
I think
as
we
a
just
public hearing?
asked, can we have this placed on a future agenda for public?
And I believe staff just agreed, so
Mhm.
we can place that on a P and Z agenda for next month as a
All
public
right.
hearing, and then you can consider the ordinance.
Okay.
I have a question too, that I know there's costs associated with doing public hearings. I guess, Dave, I don't know if you know this, do we have anything else potentially coming up for a public hearing that we would, like, is this an emergency that we should spend money to have?
Actually,
a
there's going to be
speci-
some
a Public hearing
discussion.
specific to it, or should we lump it in with the next public hearing?
I would hope that we could lump it in. You know, that we would be able to.
I mean, I
make a
think from
bigger
a practical
postcard and put
standpoint,
more
this
than
is
one thing
probably
on
not a
it, yeah.
big, it sounds like
We-
we don't have an issue really, but it's something we
We
should
have
do.
tried to schedule public
Should we
hearings,
save
you know,
money?
joint public hearings with city council and P and Z together, primarily because of the economy of it. Or at least one big reason for it, and I think that, yeah, to the extent that we can economize and consider more than one thing in a single public hearing, I think that's.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
what we
fine
ought to be
having a
doing.
public hearing on its own, but it seems like
Yeah.
it's not a huge problem that we're tackling with immediacy, so if we want to put it on the next one, I guess that may be up to staff.
And I'm still not hearing any discussion on the whether you guys want to talk about, or there's a community interest in talking about short-term rental of residential amenities, or just rental of residential amenities, period.
Yeah.
Do you see the
I mean,
distinction I'm making?
I
really
do,
flummoxed
yeah.
At
by this,
all,
I do,
or
yeah.
just for
You know,
short-term?
I do, I mean, it seems like an easier change just to add it here to the short term, and then I
Alright.
guess the next question would be, so then are we saying, is somebody gonna try to get around that by renting it for a longer period of time? It's hard to envision that, but.
That's what we needed to
Yeah.
know from you as staff. We need to be directed from staff on that. So it sounds like short-term.
So the distinct,
is
I
what
think,
you
I
would-
think to not be a short term, it's 30 days or longer. So if we don't change it to apply to all rentals, then someone could in theory rent their pool for 30 days to someone. And
Or
I
a
guess
year.
somebody could go around it, they could put it on Swimley
the
for a
summer.
30-day rental, but they could charge them like it was a one-day rental, but I don't know. That seems far-fetched, but.
Just providing us some direction
Yeah.
really helps for us to be able to post it.
So I
accurately.
guess we would, this, which is just for discussion purposes only, is there another section that would, where you would focus on it as any commercial use, or defining it as a commercial use, or do we have any specific thoughts, or would we just say we should close all the loopholes? And then we go from there.
I think the example that was brought up in the city council meeting, and tell me if I'm wrong or not, Brooke, was someone who rents their pool to someone who taught swim lessons all summer out of their backyard pool. And people came from all over to take the swim lessons there. So that was the example of potentially, possibly a commercial use in a residential area. So just to consider
okay.
something like that.
Yeah, and I guess, I think we should just close all the loopholes, but I don't know that we have the.
I think
the example Desiree has raised is a different issue. That would be a home occupation in certain instances. And so I think the question is, for purposes of short-term, do we want to allow a resident to do a long-term rental of their swimming pool for non-resident use outside of what might otherwise be a home occupation? For example, can you get around the short-term rental of your pool by renting it out from time to time on a monthly basis, but your renter's only going to show up for 2 days and then terminate the lease, and then you can rent it for another 30 days. You know, it's a loophole that we can close by language properly drafted. And I think the question is, do you see a need, and or would it be also within the scope of this ordinance to prohibit any rental of an outdoor facility for purposes of recreational use? The exception being if you had a home occupation of teaching swimming that's otherwise allowed as a home occupation, we would probably permit that. But the concern is that you have a short-term rental, the homeowner's away, you have people having parties in the backyard and creating problems, nuisances. So that's the concept. And if you want it drafted so that you couldn't rent long-term or short-term basis, you can rent your home on a long-term basis. And maybe the thing to do would be to write it so that you can't do a short-term rental separate and apart from, you can't do a rental of any amenity separate and apart from a long-term rental. So that would fix the issue, I think, at the council level. That was what the discussion was.
The way this is written, or the way this was given to us, is the example of just changing the short-term rental ordinance. But if, in fact, it is something beyond just the short-term rental piece, it would actually require changes, maybe the creation of a separate ordinance plus this change of the short-term.
That's probably right.
Examined that question,
and Yeah.
I would leave that to our city attorney.
All right.
So I think conceptually, do we want to prohibit the long-term and short-term rentals of amenities, which I think is
If that's
a good
what's
idea.
being asked for us, then how do we determine whether we agree that that's a good thing to do without a motion?
I think, do you think it's a good idea, Dave?
I think it's a good idea.
Jerry, good idea?
Sure.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. Looks
See,
like we got
But you see, I got in trouble.
some
by
general
doing
consensus.
that
We do not have an
very-
official
I-
consensus,
I
but we
got
have
in
an
trouble
informal
with that
consensus.
just a few minutes ago.
Well, there's no motion before, it was just talking.
Exactly that.
If I may suggest,
Yes.
perhaps a motion would be in order to request that the city staff bring back an ordinance at the next P&Z meeting that would prohibit short-term and long-term rental of amenities.
I think we can't make a motion
Oh,
on
you
that.
can't.
We can just ask for it. So I think we're asking for it.
That's-
Yeah,
That's right.
I think we got to,
We would like to direct, that staff has asked for direction, we would like to direct staff to.
we think that's a good idea to not have commercial or short-term.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We all agree to this, right?
right, right.
Okay, and we don't have to say aye or anything.
Well, we're going to vote on it later, so we'll figure it out then. We'll still have to vote.
Oh,
We'll
that
have to make-
depends
I
on
mean,
what's being brought back to us, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, we just told them what to bring back to us conceptually, and we'll get that, and then there'll be a public hearing, and then we'll
I'll
vote.
tell you.
Actually, you discussed it, you haven't.
We have not made a motion, we've just discussed it, yeah.
So
Right.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, isn't that right? We've not made a motion, I want to be clear about it.
So the motion should be to direct staff to,
There's no motion
There's not
being
going to be
made
a
tonight.
motion.
I thought
Has
that's
to be
what
a-
you were
just
saying.
You're just requesting that staff
Yeah.
bring back an ordinance.
on a proposal, a resolution,
Yeah, there's no
you vote
possible action.
on whether to direct staff to bring back a
It's not like discussion and possible action, or just discussion.
Right,
No
right,
action.
right, and I understand that, but I thought that's what Rick was
But,
asking
yeah,
us to do.
Yeah, when I thought,
That's what
and I thought that we had settled this thing 10 minutes ago, all right? And then it sounded like there was a question. Did we settle?
Direct us on how the action
Yeah.
needs to be taken.
Yeah.
No action taken.
No, yeah,
So
yeah.
I think Tony summed it up nicely. He requested that staff bring back an ordinance to the next P and Z meeting that could be considered for action at that point. Is that correct? And is it regarding just short-term or all
It's
rental of rental
all, yeah,
amenities?
we would like it to cover all, and we'll have to do that with a public hearing.
Correct.
So then the other question is, would we like to do a public hearing on this ASAP, or do we want to tell staff at their discretion, if we have, you know, if it's a costly thing to do, to lump it in with the next?
It's always nice to have more than one, but we can do that as
No,
however
and
you
I
would
think
like.
I think we would want to be able to group these things together, so that
Okay.
Yeah,
a
I don't
single
see this
public
as a
hearing-
pressing
Yeah.
emergency, so I think
Right.
we could add it at the
Right.
next time we're gonna have a public hearing.
Okay, so you've requested staff bring this back to the next public hearing for P and Z as an ordinance, with no rental of residential amenities in the city
That's
of
right.
Rollingwood. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'll
Or
ask
commercial
one
use.
question, because sometimes, you know, if we get the language for the first time for a public hearing and somebody doesn't like it and wants to tweak it, now we have to call another public hearing.
Correct.
So could we ask staff to bring us at the next planning and zoning meeting some proposed language for discussion purposes only that we could then provide feedback on, and then potentially ask for a,
Then you could take full action if we post it for discussion and action at the next one to bring it for a public hearing. Yes, and you could have a longer discussion.
but if that hasn't been posted for a public hearing, we couldn't actually make
Correct.
the change.
You would post it for discussion, you would, oh, I'm sorry.
That's fine. Yeah, we can post for discussion and action on a potential ordinance or discussion of the specific topic, this item. And then if you direct us at that point, you make a motion to bring it for a public hearing as soon as possible, or with the next public hearing that P and Z holds. However you
I
determine
think
the
that's what I'm
motion at
looking
that
for,
point.
is so that we can get language to discuss
They would like the language.
ahead of actually calling the public hearing.
Let-
Yeah.
review
Then
it
call the public.
and post
So
whatever
let me
changes.
put for
Exactly.
discussion and action at the next planning and zoning meeting, something with a language
That
discussion.
addresses both commercial use and short-term use of
Commercial
amenities.
use and short-term
Yeah.
use. Perfect.
Yeah.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Donnie. All right. Okay, we're moving on to regular agenda item number 6, discussion on a schedule for review and recommendation regarding the proposed commercial code amendments in accordance with the comprehensive plan. And I think we have a speaker.
Brooke Brown, the council liaison for P&Z. And this schedule has been drafted pursuant to council discussion at the last city council meeting to come up with a proposed schedule for presenting to planning and zoning the proposed zoning changes associated with the policies in the the comprehensive plan. Most of these zoning changes relate to the commercial corridor. There are a few that would relate to the governmental, business, industrial, hospital, and park zoning areas, but primarily these are zoning changes that implement the policies of the comprehensive plan, which was primarily for the commercial zoning district. So what this schedule would do would be to establish a series of public meetings. As you look down the proposal, first would be action taken by the city council at next city council meeting, the March city council meeting, to adopt this schedule. But we want your input on it, and that's why I'm here tonight. the first meeting would be April 1, and that would be that's the notice to be sent of a joint public hearing with planning and zoning and the city council, hearing from that would be the date notice, April 1 is the date notice would go out for a joint public hearing. April 5 is when it's posted in the newspaper. That joint public hearing would be scheduled to be held on April 24, 2024, and that is a joint public hearing of the planning and zoning and the city council. The next date would be the date of May 1, in which P&Z would meet to go through half of the proposal. The second meeting would be on May 8 to go through the second part of the proposal and make recommendations to the city council at both those meetings on those parts of the zoning changes that would be presented. And the reason this is in two pieces is because right now it's about 35 pages of ordinance language, and so it's a little bit too much for one meeting. So that's why we're recommending that we do this in two meetings, both at planning and zoning and at city council. And the proposal would be that planning and zoning would meet May 1, first meet April 24 jointly with the city council, meet May 1, just P&Z to consider half of the changes, meet May 8 to consider the second half of the changes, and then it would be presented to the city council, and the council would meet May 22 and May 29 for action on the same items that have been recommended by the planning and zoning. If you recall, there are approximately 20 recommendations in the comprehensive plan. These zoning changes address almost all of those recommendations. Some did not require zoning change, so they're more aspirational than ordinance level projects. So that's what this is, and what we're hoping to do before we notice that first public hearing, that we get consensus from planning and zoning that yes, you can make these meetings and we can go forward with this schedule on those changes.
So,
And we should have, the intention is that as soon as we hope by March 20, we will have the actual proposed draft ordinance. That's our plan. And it's in the hands of the city attorney at this point in time for putting in the final commas and periods and drafting. The heavy lifting's been done. We're waiting the final draft. So our plan would be to get it to planning and zoning informally as soon as it's available, along with a summary that's being prepared that has each of the comprehensive plan policies with a list underneath that policy of how that policy's been enacted in the proposed zoning changes. So kind of we hope handy, though lengthy and a bit dense, a guide to where you planning and zoning can look at each policy and then look at each ordinance change that addresses that policy. So that's the plan, and to have it available to you well in advance of this April 24 date. Thank you.
So you're asking if we're going to be available on these days, is that right?
Yes.
And that's really, so we can just go round robin here and just say, yes, we think we can make these dates, and that's all you need from us. Okay, just to be clear. All right. Have you all had a chance to look at these dates and compare them with your calendar? Okay. Jeannie, what do you think?
I'm
available.
All right, for all of the things that P&Z is supposed to be involved with.
Now, the Wednesday, May 22nd,
that's when the city council is to receive the recommendations. Now, do you want P and Z members at that meeting? Or is that, I mean, the ones on, up until then, I understand, and, I mean, I'm available, but I'm not sure on May 22nd and 29th if you need us at those meetings.
It's not required, but like it would be nice if the chair and or someone else came from PNC to
Okay.
present that to city council.
All right, I'm
All right.
available for all of them.
Great. All right,
Not sure I want to,
Michael?
but.
Yeah, I expect to be available for
okay, good. Tony?
I have a conflict just for the May 1st. I have a conference.
Conflict, May 1st, okay.
And I'm available.
All right, good. And I'm available for all except the April 24th. And I really wish I could be there.
That's a pretty important one, isn't it?
I'm sorry? No, I'll be on another planet, literally. Yeah, I won't be here.
If that's the case, Dave, if you're not available, I think at your next meeting, you would need to designate someone to
Yeah.
chair for P and Z
Yeah, we can do
at that meeting.
Yeah, we ought to do that. You're right. I'll make some phone calls. Very good, okay.
And staff, if we can just make sure that we post that correctly on the next P and Z agenda, that a chair would be selected for that.
Okay. Or probably a co-chair for P and Z.
I think the other thing we need, since we have two people who are absent tonight from P and Z, we do need to make sure and confirm that we can have a quorum for the April 24th meeting. So it looks like at this point, you guys that are here will need to all be there for a quorum.
That's right. Plus one.
Plus one.
Yeah.
Plus one?
Yeah. Oh,
Or no,
no,
just
four.
four,
Yeah,
yeah.
the four.
Yeah.
That'll do it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, these four will do it.
And that one is a public hearing, right?
That is a
24th,
public
yeah.
hearing, yes.
Good.
And then, yeah, there'll need to be,
And what will be the objective of your, of that specific meeting?
that
Because
is
the
the
next
pub,
one we review the language, but what's that one?
state law requires that there be a public hearing at both planning and zoning and city council. And that public hearing is one that's noticed citywide, and it's a very formal meeting. What will happen there is that will be the formal presentation to planning and zoning and the city council and the community of what these changes are. So it's going to be an overview of a walkthrough of what the changes are and receipt of public testimony, any public comment on that. Then the work to vote on those changes would be for P&Z at the May 1 and May 8 meeting. And we need to ensure that there's quorums for those two meetings as well.
So no action would take place at the 24th. The action would take place at the 1st and the 8th.
Is that correct, Desiree?
So do the other ones have to be public hearings if action, like if we're changing code at those or approving code?
Action can take place on a public hearing, like.
Right, but I'm wondering on the May 1st and May 8th, do those have to be public hearings because we were potentially approving code changes?
Well, since it's the composite draft of the April 24th one, the public hearing is on the composite draft, and then we're breaking it down for P&Z too. Is that correct?
You're breaking down the action, taking action to vote out a recommendation into two meetings instead of just one.
So, what do you think on that, if they have a composite public hearing together on the entire listing of them, but then they discuss and have action on the ordinances in two separate meetings?
I think that's fine.
But there'd be action at all of those meetings.
Great.
Yes.
I thought if we were recommending code changes, it had to be a public hearing now.
That is the public hearing is April 24. May 1
But
and
what
May.
if, but what if May 1st we're
You
making
don't-
changes to what was approved 24th?
You can you're permitted to take action on April 24. You don't have to. You can take action at the subsequent they're not public hearings, they're open meetings of the P&Z on May 1 and May 8. And you would vote out recommendations on parts A through C on May 1 and D through F on
Right.
May 8.
I was just making sure if somebody at that one said, I'd like to slightly tweak this language, and we all say, yeah, we want to tweak the language.
It
that
doesn't-
that we're not prevented from doing that because it's not a public hearing.
That's right.
That's right, yeah. And then the city council would be doing the same thing, acting on your recommendations on the 22nd and the 29th.
Got it.
Okay. Is there any more about this? Okay, then let's move on to agenda item number 7, discussion and possible action on CRCRC connecting driveway recommendation. And you have something in your packet on that. And it, I'd like to guide you to the third attachment there, which is the CRCRC recommendation on driveways connecting two streets, dated today, 3/6/2024.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
This is effectively what I'm looking for to get approval or not this evening to move forward with the city council. I think you're familiar with our desire to originally get rid of the ordinance that talks about connecting streets, driveways that connect streets, and so we're formalizing that this evening, or we're going to try to. And the question has been put in the survey, the CRCRC survey, should we reconsider code limitations placed on circular driveways for a corner lot to connect two streets? And the response had been 150 out of 274 respondents, 156 or 57% said yes, 112 or 40% said no, and 6 or 3% had no response. There were 71 comments on this particular question. 48 of them were very supportive of it, saying, why not? Yeah, it makes sense to me. Yeah, it sounds like it's a good safety move. Yeah, I've been in that situation before myself, and I really would like to get this done, and that kind of thing. 6 of them were against it because of safety reasons. They were concerned that it might present an unsafe situation, that backing out near a corner might be a problem. And then 16 were against it for a variety of reasons, like, oh, we just shouldn't have any more driveways. There's too much impervious cover already, and a lot of comments like that. They were just kind of general things. Now, the recommendation to remove this ordinance was presented to CRCRC, and it was approved unanimously by every member, okay? But, and I had taken this to city council, and they had asked me if, before we took this to P&Z, if we would consult with the police department to make sure that, in fact, we were on solid footing with regard to safety. I'd had a conversation with Police Chief Crystal Munoz the day before yesterday on this thing. And she was okay with it, provided that rather than getting rid of the ordinance, that we change the ordinance such that you are allowed to have a driveway connecting two streets. But the edge, for the leading edge of the driveway closest to the intersection needed to be at least 30 feet away from the corner, which I thought was a perfectly reasonable thing. And her concern is that, and you can correct me, Chief, if you'd like to speak, by all means, please do.
Right, so, just to kind of give you a little bit of background of the 30 feet, the 30 feet is actually it's in the traffic code that you cannot park, stand, or anything within the 30 feet of any traffic control device. So what that 30 feet is doing is still providing that line of sight to the traffic control device without any hindrance. If it just basically is keeping that clear is what we're requesting.
Okay. So from our perspective, from the CRCRC perspective, we're getting what it is we want, and with some reasonable constraints placed on it. Between the day before yesterday and today, I have been in contact with each of the CRCRC members, and all but one of them has responded to me. It says there 5 have responded, but it's actually 6. All but one have responded and said, yeah, this is a great idea. Yeah, we're good with that. So, you have before you, okay, this is kind of gives you a little bit of a pictorial look at what it is we're looking at, and that's 30 feet. And I don't know, Chief, if you've seen this. It's kind of like what we drew out, but a little nicer. Here.
I don't think I have that.
Yeah, you should
It
have.
was in the packet.
It should be there. It's in the.
I must have printed it
Here,
before.
you can,
Unless I'm on the wrong page.
It'll be the last one of those. There you go. Yeah.
It was added yesterday.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So you can see the way we represented this is that X represents a stop sign, for instance. And that in that case, you have 30 feet between the corner of the intersection and the corner on the leading edge of the driveway that's below it. But we're also making that same requirement for the corner that does not have the stop sign on it. So that both of those corners have to have a 30-foot spread between the intersection and where the driveway begins. And I looked at it, actually walked it out on a couple of corner things. That'll work just great. Yeah, 30 feet is probably what you'd do anyway. So,
What are the building setbacks on a corner lot are 30 feet in front and 30 foot on the side?
that's correct, yes.
So I guess I'm just thinking of course you could push your house back, but if you wanted to be at that setback, that driveway is going to be right on the corner of your house.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty close to the corner of the house, yeah. If you're right on the setback, yeah. But a lot of houses aren't.
Yeah.
And in our particular case, and I bring this up an awful lot, we have a 30-foot setback requirement from the front of our house and the side of our house, but we also have a 10-foot right-of-way city, so we're actually back from the curb 40 feet. So if I wanted to do it, and I don't, but if I wanted to do it, this would be easy to do on our corner.
Yeah, there might be some houses where it might be more challenging with where the house is. So,
But yeah, no, it's,
then I
at
guess
that point,
yeah.
they
do
would
it.
just go request a variance, right?
well, I don't know. I mean, if you could, I guess you could,
Yeah.
maybe you could have a bow-shaped kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
We're not here to tell you how to do it. We're just telling you this is
Well-
what you're restricted this way.
But right now, to have any kind of corner driveway, you have to go request a variance. And so,
And they don't get that.
And it actually doesn't have to go to the BOA, and I still am not
It has to
totally clear
go
on
to
this.
the,
but-
I've
No, it
witnessed
doesn't.
this.
We approved one in planning and zoning.
yeah, I had to write a letter for
It was
my
a-
neighbor across the street and I mean, it was a big deal.
We had one come. It didn't go to B of A. It came here,
Yeah.
and we approved it,
Yeah, and they did it?
and they did it.
Well.
Now,
I
well,
don't-
you know what? I say
what?
that.
I don't think that's true. But
I
will-
say that it wasn't a corner. It didn't go from one street to the other. That's the
Yeah,
difference.
the thing is,
it was in the just in the.
I have witnessed this going to BOA 3 times. It has never been passed. And which is the reason why.
Specifically on the corner from street to street.
Yeah, that's it, doing this, and for safety reasons, people were
My
saying,
neighbor got
it would be
it
safer for us to have this than to not have it, we would really like to do it, there's an ordinance on the books that says we're not allowed to do it. Can I get a variance? And they said, well, that, you're not proving hardship. And they said, well, it's for safety reasons. Well, that's not good enough. And so they got turned down. I've never seen it passed.
I remember
Well-
the one we passed, there was a normal driveway on
Yeah.
one side, one street, and then they just made a circle drive on the other street.
Did you-
but it
I
didn't
think
connect one
that
street
my
together.
my neighbor across the street, I think they had to go to the city council to get approval. Because it was denied by,
I'd like to understand what, did
but
you
it
say
was for safety. I mean, it
official-
was a
at
huge
first
safety
that
issue.
CRCRC was
To be
gonna-
able to drive forward out instead of backing out is huge sometimes.
Yeah.
So it was, it's an advantage
would
to be
drive
able
into
to
that.
drive forward through, out.
Jerry had a question.
Well, I thought at first you said that CRC said delete the ordinance entirely.
That's right.
And then you came back and said, well, we'll keep it and put in 30 feet somewhere.
No, it's not
What?
really keeping it, it's changing it to something else, which is, the ordinance would be changed from, if you go, currently, it says,
Were they yellow?
currently, sir, it says circular driveways or continuous driveways with more than one curb cut shall be allowed
Right.
only on one street on corner lots.
Right.
This includes driveways that cut across corners, so it's an ordinance of disallowance, you're not allowed to do it.
All right, well,
All
I had-
right, and we would replace that, I think, with wording that would be more like, circular driveways connecting two streets on a corner lot shall be allowed, provided that the edge of the driveway closest to the intersecting street corner may be no closer than 30 feet to the intersecting corner.
Oh, I didn't get it. Was that number 4?
Yeah, I didn't get that one either.
Is that number
I think we
4?
printed ours
That is-
earlier.
that is the
Apparently
one.
they changed it a couple
Yeah.
days ago.
Oh,
Okay.
well, I got comments on this, on number 3, for example.
Oh, I don't know anything about that.
Well, it's 3, it's talking about the grade of the driveway.
Okay,
Provide positive stuff, and if it's not, make sure it doesn't drain into, cause flow into other people's property, which is, maybe one of the main reasons I'm sitting here, because of the drainage project down on my, house. My, neighbor, has a driveway that, let's say, is turned down, doesn't hump up. And when gully washer occurs, it turns into a waterfall, and his backyard turns into a pond. And so, after several years of hollering and screaming and my neighbor complaining about the drainage down there, Nixon and Pleasant Drive, we're getting it corrected pretty quickly here. It's only costing the city about $500,000 to get the hump on his driveway and put an inlet at the bottom of the hill that wasn't put in when it was originally installed back in the mid-1950s for maybe $500. So I would like to have number 3 paragraph completely deleted and added that driveway shall be constructed per City of Austin driveway,
Thank you.
driveway standard details and as approved by
I
the
don't
city
think-
engineer.
Mr. Chair.
Jerry, you see, that's not what we're here to talk
We're-
about.
I was afraid of
That's
that.
right. We're not posted for that tonight.
Yeah.
We can
No.
add that to a
And so-
future agenda.
If
Why-
you would like, I think you could make a motion to say you would like to have it discussed for next meeting.
No, we would just,
Say that.
you could,
Ask.
you could just recommend to staff that they add it to a future agenda to be considered.
Oh, okay, sounds good. Now I got more comments.
On item 9, where it's a discussion of future meeting topics, that's where you could add that you would like to discuss that when we get to item 9.
I don't have item 9.
On the agenda.
On the agenda,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Well, can you talk about driveways in general?
No, we can talk about driveways that are connecting, not this evening. We can talk about
City government
driveways that
law
are
is very
connecting.
particular.
Yeah.
We can only talk about,
What's on the
yeah,
agenda,
Yeah,
okay, what's
Specifically.
on the agenda is approving the circular driveway.
that's
Right.
correct.
On the corner.
On a corner of connecting two streets.
Okay, I can talk about that for a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, because I just got, because I'm gonna put on my community hat, like for the first time, brand new hat. You may not know me, I'm a recently retired MEP engineer, and I've got this engineering background, not community or not a lawyer, engineer. And so a lot of these things are new to me on trying to get a hold of the Rollingwood character and what's happening, how we're supposed to be working here and what we're supposed to be doing. And I'm just trying to get my head around it. And
Take some time.
yeah, they gave me this, well, I just got it today, the comprehensive plan. And I'm reading, and Dave gave me some background on, well, what are we supposed to be doing? And they talked about trees and replacing them and maintaining the Rollingwood character. Okay, so I'll just quickly and so I'm trying to get into the Rollingwood character and what we're supposed to be doing. And the first thing here is tree change.
Commissioner, we're not
Yeah.
posted for that tonight.
Oh, we're not either?
No, sir.
No.
Well, what if I say that circular driveways, if they're an addition to the regular driveway, should not be allowed or justified? Is that,
You can discuss making conditions to the CRCRC recommendation pertaining to circular driveways.
so what are we making a motion on today on the driveway?
Whether or not we are going to permit circular driveways that connect to intersecting streets.
And
That's the recommendation that we can discuss.
That's the
tonight.
recommendation.
Oh, and when I can speak about why we should not.
You
You
can?
You can explain.
Okay,
why we
well, that's
should
what I was
not.
trying to get to. Okay, I'll try to be real quick, 2 minutes here. The gist of what I was trying to say in here is they're addressing impervious cover, which, as we all know, covers up the tree roots, increases the drainage runoff, which is the number one issue in here, increases the heat sink, and as for aesthetic, which to me is a pretty shaky ground, being an engineer, is I don't know if anybody's ever considered it a thing of beauty. So you look at those things and you look at, well, why are we doing it? What's the pro and justification for it? And the only thing I see is convenience. Now, if it's more than convenience, we already talked about safety, and I see a lot of cons that the people have put the work in here in their community interest. And so I'm about came to the conclusion that, well, is it justified? Or a question could be, and bear with me, it's after the owner's interests have been satisfied, is it reasonable to have the owner consider, accommodate the community interest and needs? That's a question I have, or trying to get my head on this. And because the driveway hits all those things, and increases the drainage. So the next thing I kind of contemplate was, how do you, is there a way to accommodate it? Both. So am I digressing?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I think what
when
you're
we
saying
started
is
this-
you don't think that the
Yeah.
safety pros of allowing a driveway like this outweighs some of the negatives that you perceive to
Well,
be
I
associated.
haven't seen the evidence of the safety.
Uh-huh.
I,
You don't live on the corner of Edge Grove and Rollingwood Drive.
that's right, there are lots of times
Yeah.
when safety is an issue.
Yeah.
And especially when in a topography like we have, where we have people backing out uphill, that, and they have limited visibility. So, I mean, for example, my neighbor across the street had to go through Board of Adjustment, finally got to City Council, because they backed up and they hit our cars twice backing up. They couldn't see. So ultimately, the City Council did approve them to have a circular driveway that was connecting perpendicular streets. And it was very definitely a safety issue. And it was for the public good that was allowed.
Yeah.
So I think that actually that it's safer to drive forward out of a driveway than
Well,
backing up
that-
sometimes, so.
Well, that's fine. That's, like I said, I was trying to commute all the stuff they're trying to give me here to what I knew that a driveway, standing alone by itself. And to me, I was seeing more convenience than safety. So, and there probably could be instances
Yeah.
where it would be applicable and recommended, but I'm not sure it's in every case.
The last,
And
Yeah.
you'll see people, you know, take advantage of it.
this isn't requiring people on street corners to put circular driveways in.
Yeah,
This is on a need basis only, okay? But right now, they're not allowed to do it. Now, the last time I saw someone get turned down for this, and they went 3 times to city council and the BOA and all that, their argument is that they had 12-year-old girls, and that these girls in a couple of years would be learning how to drive. They live on the corner of Edge Grove and Rowanwood Drive. And they are concerned because that's a very busy intersection, and there are a lot of accidents there without circular driveways, I can tell you. That could they put in a circular driveway so that their daughters don't have to back out onto the street, either street, that they could come through whenever they get their learning permits, whenever they're learning how to drive. I thought that the argument was absolutely compelling, and they got turned down. And that is why this particular thing was in the survey. Because I said, that's not right. These people should be allowed to do what they think is the right thing for their daughters from a safety perspective. And that we, the city, shouldn't be telling them that they can't do that. Now, you know, driveways are driveways, and you know, you can make arguments about impervious cover and whether or not, but I mean, everybody's gonna have a driveway. And, you know, and it's,
Yeah, I see your point. I think the problem may have been with the BOA. You know?
Yeah.
That's, a lot of the things, and that's gonna come up as a relief or a method for people to get adjustments made. 'Cause these ordinances that we do are just general. They're not gonna apply to specific sites and entities. So there's, and the people, we may not have all the professionals that should be on the BOA that can
well,
take that
yeah,
into
but we
account.
can't, yeah, and we can't fix that. But we can do something about that. This is within our purview, okay? We can't, yeah. I can tell you this too. If you go back in the code, if you go back a couple of versions of the code that we have here, 2 versions ago, that ordinance didn't exist the way that it does today. And it got put in there, and nobody knows why. I've asked there's no record of how it got in there. Nobody knows why that got
Why
in
these
the
were
code.
outlawed?
Why that was outlawed. It
People
didn't
have
used
just
to.
said,
It
people
did-
have said at some of our meetings that people were cutting the quarter, cutting through. They've said that. I don't know if that's true.
Okay,
But
well,
that's what they've
yeah.
said, that,
Yeah.
which I kind of always
I-
found hard
yeah,
to
can-
believe. But
yeah,
they said people would drive and
Yeah.
somebody's at the stop sign, so they'd cut the
Drive
corner.
around
Yeah.
the stop. Yeah, it's kind of, yes.
That was the
I find it
explanation given,
unbelievable
yeah.
myself. So if that were the reason, but I can't find that officially.
Yeah, I have a hard time
Yeah,
believing
it's-
that was happening.
So,
very much.
I know.
how many sites do we have?
How many corners?
Yeah, that,
Quite a few.
no, that people would want curb drive-through, circular drive-through.
know is, since I've lived in Rowanwood, this has been requested 3 times and they've been 3 times turned down. That's what I know. That's all I know. And I've only lived here well, I've owned property here since 2015. Been to an awful lot of city council meetings. And saw it go, and BOE meetings, and I saw it go where it goes, which is no. Literally for no other reason, and that's what the ordinance says. And you can't prove hardship. What you're telling me is not hardship. So,
Do you,
Getting through
When we
BOA
were-
is a very high bar.
yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. The BOA calls hardship a very, they make it very difficult.
There's some
to get
state,
past.
yeah,
You don't want to go to the BOA for anything. I don't know.
so we can't add any more, items or change the ordinance any right now? You have to,
How it's posted is what you need to make your recommendation on.
If I can help, maybe this is the recommendation that came from CRC.
Yeah.
And they're bringing it to P and Z to see if you guys say, yeah, we agree, and we'd like to recommend this to city council for consideration.
Right. That's,
We're starting this process. Obviously, the chair and us and maybe the council liaisons need to smooth out this process a little, but this one is pretty clear cut.
yeah. Do we or don't we?
I don't love the having to be 30 feet. I frankly wish people could be closer, but I recognize, I mean, you know, if that's all we can do because of, you know,
I-
kind of safety visibility issues. And because I will say, to Jerry's point, this is just a much bigger area of driveway than if it were 10 or 15 feet.
And this is only one solution, right? Like, if your lot doesn't accomplish this, you might be able to do a circular drive just on one of those 2 streets
Right.
or something. There's other ways you could skin the cat here in a way, right? You wouldn't have to do this if 30 feet causes a hardship. This just gives you another tool in the case that this works.
can you, include material of the driveway?
You would have to go back to the CRCRC to discuss that.
All right,
That's also generally governed by, you know, the building code portions of the code of ordinances. So
well, this-
when those driveways are constructed, there are some strict compliance obligations that the homeowners have to
all
comply
right,
with.
then.
Well, you know that the TCEQ has a certain requirement as to what's allowed as far as impervious cover. And so does the drainage ordinance here in Rowanwood. The drainage criteria manual is very specific about how much impervious cover you're allowed to have. And that includes driveways and sidewalks. That's all included in the impervious cover calculation. So if somebody is able to meet the requirements of the impervious cover, requirements, what difference does it make the shape of the driveway is? And I can tell you that, you know, you would think that the TCEQ would allow certain materials to be pervious, but they don't. They're pretty strict about what is.
Okay,
Yeah, they're pretty strict.
I gotta plead ignorance on the impervious allowable on the sites. I haven't found that code yet. I don't know you remember what percent we're at? Well, anyway.
We don't have a limit. You have to, the TCEQ regulates water capture, which is impacted by impervious coverage. So you have some indirect, practical impervious coverage, but no technical impervious coverage.
What the TCEQ requires is that if you are adding impervious cover beyond 200 square feet, you have to have something mitigating to keep water from going to your neighbor. That's it.
If you add more than 250 square feet of impervious coverage, you have to do an engineering study to
Yeah, that's
determine.
right. You have to do an engineering study. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we're veering.
We're
Which
way off
almost
topic.
always
We're way
goes
off
on
topic.
something. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well,
Okay.
I'll be quiet.
Well,
And let-
okay. Jeannie?
Well, I actually agree. I think 30 feet is a little big. I mean, I would actually feel more comfortable at maybe 25, because the setbacks for the house itself, they're at 30. So, I mean, can we change it to 25 instead of 30?
Yeah.
No,
Was it a,
it's
is it a
traffic.
state traffic code issue? Is it, because also I know we have some that are less than 30 feet, so I guess those would be.
So that's just our recommendation to
Just
provide, yeah,
recommendation.
correct, provide that line of sight. Now, of course,
Yeah.
that's in addition to any other stipulation that you put on it, but that's just our recommendation.
Because
is
we
the
also
30
have
feet.
around a stop sign, we have some rules around height of landscaping.
Correct.
Et cetera.
Well,
So I guess the
yeah.
concern would be if you had, you know, if it's at 10 feet and you had it filled with 3 cars parked there, that all the way to the street, you would have a visibility issue.
Well, I was thinking about the house you were talking about across the street from you. I know
Yeah.
exactly which one you're talking about.
Right.
Would 30 feet accommodate that?
It does, actually, yeah.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, it does.
Okay,
It makes
because
it-
their
Yeah.
lot's not real
Well,
big.
see, the reason, you know, and this, they have a lot that's similar to ours, in that, you know, they have a 30-foot frontage, you know, setback, but they also have an additional 10 feet right away. So the house is actually pushed back from the street 40 feet,
Okay,
you know, you can do it.
so they could,
Yeah, actually, I walked it, directly after my meeting with Chief, I went to that house
okay,
to look to see whether or not that would all work, and it would work just great.
okay.
Yeah, it'll work.
I will say, I'm sure there are some,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm totally fine with the concept. I would imagine that there are some houses where you might not be able to do the 30 feet.
I'm sure
If
that's
there's
true.
already a house there that's closer.
Yeah.
Um,
But.
So I wish that
like I said,
everyone in the corner could.
Okay, as
have an
long as
opportunity.
you think about it.
Because those
this way.
people won't
Well,
be
you
able to
think
get through
about it, you know,
DOA.
this is a connecting driveway, and we tend to think about these things as being a pure arc. You know, what if you make something that just kind of goes along the curvature of the house or whatever? You still have the connecting driveway.
do.
You still
It's
are
hard to
able
drive it,
create-
but-
You do what you want to do. But right now, you're not allowed to do that either. I mean, it's, you know, this is, for example, it's a pure arc,
But, I mean, I'm saying there's no state or traffic code issue with it, so the question
Yeah.
Jeannie had could we make it be closer without having too much fear of visibility issues from a traffic standpoint?
all I can say is we can go to city council with, I think, endorsement, I'd call it endorsement from the police department, because they asked me to ask them, right? Okay. And if we do this, if we make a change to it, I can say, well, I almost have an endorsement here, it's not
And
quite.
say they recommended
Yeah.
30 feet, we
They
recommended
recommended
25
30
feet. and we,
and
you
we're-
know,
yeah. So it would be that.
Well, if it works on that house, then I think 30 feet's fine. Because it's a pretty tight corner.
I'll tell you what, if you think about it this way, that might be the kind of thing you might look for a variance on.
Yeah,
You know,
right. Well,
once you've
that's-
established and you say, well, it's 30 feet, and they say, well, you know, I can only do it at 27.
Right.
Well,
You
that's
know.
true, and then you could go say there's no traffic code.
That's
That
right.
was just a
That's right.
recommendation.
And then you say, okay, we'll give you a couple of feet. You know, so that's something you could fight your way back on.
Right.
Right, but what we're trying to do is, I mean, the main reason why it's not allowed is because of visuals and things. So we're trying to figure out how the best way to get this in place, and also it'd be safe for everybody involved, and also vehicular traffic that's coming out on the roadway as well. And so that's why our 30 feet, I mean, we want it to stay there. Because not only that, but like you said, you have other issues, because we do get complaints regarding corners and vegetation already. And then you add other issues with driveways, it's gonna can turn into a potential mess. So that's why we're asking is like, at least provide that line of sight to that stop sign or any type of traffic control device.
Yeah, because some of these will be parking lots too. I mean,
Right.
All right?
Well, can I move that we recommend to the city council that these changes to the ordinance regarding circular driveways be made? Is that,
Yes, that sounds good to me. Okay, we have a motion?
Just to be, just to
Oh.
be clear.
If you could read the recommendation that is.
You can use those words if you like. Those are my words, but you can use them.
wait, I just already put it aside. Sorry. Well, you done.
Right there in
What did I do with it?
I'm gonna help you, IT.
I'm sorry, I had it here. Oh, here it is.
You got it? All right.
Okay,
It's the italics.
okay. That circular driveways connecting two streets on a corner lot shall be allowed, provided that the edge of the driveway closest to the intersecting street corner may be no closer, than 30 feet to the intersecting corner.
That's the motion.
That's the motion.
Okay. We have a motion?
I'll second.
All right, we have a second. Any further discussion? Let's take a vote. All in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay. The motion is, vote is 4 to 1. The motion carries. Thank you. We have, I think, just one last item here. Discussion, and that would be discussion, item 9, discussion regarding future meeting topics. All right? I'm gonna start off
This one's for you,
to
Jay.
let you know that the CRCRC is working as quickly as it can on getting new things presented. I guess this driveway thing is the first thing to actually get through P and Z, and I love it, thank you. But there will be other things. We have, the lighting ordinance is almost ready to go, or the lighting recommendations, I should say. We have a tree subcommittee who's been working very hard on their work, and it's gonna be ready for presentation here very soon. So, the next few meetings are gonna be very similar to this one, I think. You're gonna get, and the format that I used for this driveway ordinance is pretty much the format I think you're gonna see, unless you have recommendations to make it better. We're gonna show what the survey showed, what the CRCRC has reviewed and pulled from that survey, and what the recommendation is with regard to this particular area. And I hope that's working for you, and I'd like to, whenever these are all done, I want to have a binder full of these things that kind of say, well, this was this question, and this is what the ordinance came out of it, or the recommendation came out of it.
Yeah, I think that was helpful, the way y'all had it structured with the survey results there. I think that was good.
Okay.
I would say, I just to reiterate something I said earlier, I have just personally, I don't know, voiced some concerns with doing things that impact the building of the home, height, setbacks, tinting, etc., separately. Maybe we'll still do that. I'm expressing concerns about that. Driveway is pretty independent of that. I think lighting is independent of that. Trees, you could probably make an argument that they're a little bit impacted, though not the same as height versus tinting. Just being that my understanding and discussions with some people when this committee was getting formed was the idea that we didn't want to try to do this one meeting at a time at planning and zoning, taking one issue at a time, that we wanted to look at it comprehensively, and which y'all have done. And I'd say I wouldn't sacrifice dealing with actual changes based on y'all's comprehensive review and recommendations one by one for the sake of speed or pressure from citizens or government or wherever it may be. That's my personal opinion on that.
Okay. Well, at least to the point of talking about building geometry, I think we covered that pretty well, and I think that at least we can address that as one comprehensive.
I would love to see
But some
height
of these-
in conjunction with
but-
the tinting
yeah.
concepts.
But the
to
fact is,
see
some
how
of
they-
these things are just plain easier to do than other things. and the building geometry, which is really the star of the show, is just difficult to get right. To get it so that it plays well, okay? I mean, we all know well, anyway, but
It's
we
it's a
covered that.
difficult one
I don't wanna
to
bring
see
it-
all
I don't wanna
the
start into that
cascading
discussion
effects,
again.
yeah.
So, anyway, I think Jerry had a suggestion as far as
Other
future
items to
meeting
discuss,
topics,
yeah.
yeah.
Did you want to suggest any future meeting topics to tackle?
Well,
This is
My-
the
my-
time where we can do that.
yeah, once a month, seems like a long time, and then they give you stuff 5 days before, you know?
It is challenging.
Well, I can see why things get pushed back and you go back and revisit those things.
I think we talked about where you can and can't park an RV for about 6 months. Literally. They might have been longer. Literally.
But
We did make a change. I don't remember what it was.
So, but are you all then set on once a month meetings?
Oh, that's what we do. Yeah, I don't think we can change that, Jerry.
No.
Yeah. This,
There occasionally
and
have
for
been
us,
there
you know-
occasionally have been subcommittees, or I don't know what the definition is, but
Yeah.
you can't have more than 3 people
Right.
in a meeting outside of this. But we have had a few times where there was some topic that needed further discussion, and I think 3 people had a separate meeting.
That we're
to discuss
interested
that.
in wanting to get up to speed on it.
Right.
Or, you know, because, I'm, like I said, I'm just now digging into,
Right.
new territory and trying to, see where, not only the community's at, but, the whole aspect. I never.
Well, you've
put a
got
lot
no
of
better
picture-
resource than our leader sitting next to you.
well, if there is something that you want to have discussed,
You don't have to do it here.
you
know.
can send me a note. It's all right, and and we can talk about it without breaking any rules about the Open Meetings Act and stuff about getting it onto the agenda. I set the agenda, okay? Or, well, I should say, City Council and I set the agenda. If City Council wants something on our agenda, it gets on there. But most of the things come from me. So if there's something you want to discuss, we can bring it up. If there is a reason to create a subcommittee to study a particular topic, there's a very good chance that could happen. And that subcommittee, just the way Tony described it, would comprise about 3 people, and they could go and they could meet freely to whatever schedule they wanted to and then present. But that needs to be recognized here beforehand. That subcommittee needs to be approved by this group. So. And it can involve other people outside of the PNC. You can do that. So.
Okay. So to change that paragraph 3, I go to the staff.
Paragraph. If you really want, I'll tell you what, send me an email of what it is you want to do, and let's figure out how to get it, okay? Just do that.
Well, does staff generate ordinance changes?
Well, you first have to discuss it
Yeah.
openly before you can actually suggest any changes. So you'd have to say, I have some concerns with this piece of code. Dave, could we get it on an agenda so that we could discuss and see if there's other people that have the same viewpoint and are potentially interested in changing this code? Then we would ask staff, I'm trying to think of the order.
Yeah.
Then we would ask staff to generate some language to review. Then if it's changing code, we would have a public hearing. We'd probably want to get input from council before we did that, because anything we do
Yeah.
is nothing until city council approves it. So it's a little bit of a waste of time if we go write a bunch of code, have a public hearing, all agree on it, send it to city council, and they say, I have no interest in this.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of interplay between
Yeah.
meetings, and it takes a long time because city council's once a month, we're once a month.
Yeah.
It just takes
Yeah.
Right.
a lot of time.
We move at the speed of government.
Well, does the staff generate, code changes? Or
Not
does-
ad hoc, not without being requested
No.
from us.
No.
You know,
They only change it if we propose it and city council approves it.
Well, what about, you're under the 2015 building codes.
That's not us. That's not us.
Who is it?
That is staff.
Well, there you
Okay, there's that. There's that.
So,
That's not us.
okay,
Yeah.
but they will make the change directly to the city council then.
Building code is approved by city council.
Yeah.
Like they adopt the version. of
Right,
building code
independent
that's used.
of
No,
us.
no, yeah.
City council can do a lot of things, yeah.
Well, I'm learning the ropes.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Okay.
very good. I appreciate
Okay.
your indulgence.
Okay.
But you can always email any concerns you have to any of your elected officials, and then they would take it
Yeah.
up if they were interested in it by putting it on the city council agenda or directing P and Z to consider that.
Yeah, a lot of times city council tells us to consider things like the amenity rental.
Yeah. I think that what Jerry's asking about, there was the actual building codes, the international building code and that kind of thing. It's
And those
definitely-
are
it's not-
adopted by
that's
city
not
council.
us.
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. Any more discussion around this? It is 20 minutes till 9.
I move, we adjourn.
Okay, I'll look for that.
It's 9,
Oh,
do we have a
need
second on that?
I second.
Okay, all right. All in favor of adjourning? Aye. All right, it is 9:27, or 37. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.